world-renowned bassist Christian McBride writes in a memorial to pianist McCoy Tyner how John Coltrane mentored him and how he would later become not only Coltrane's pianist, but an icon unto his own. What McCoy Tyner would do is to hang out with Coltrane, learn from him, gain from Coltrane's experiences, knowledge, and talents. That's what one of today's growing iconic pianists is now doing with her students and other young musicians she encounters. I'm talking about Kris Davis. Hi, this is Steve Browngen, and you're listening to Strictly Jazz Sounds, your podcast for conversations about all things jazz. In this episode, I talk with Grammy Award-winning pianist Kris Davis extensively about mentoring, her leadership roles with nonprofit label Pyroclastic Records, which promotes non-commercial adventurous music, and the Berklee Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice, where she's the Associate Program Director of Creative Development. Her calm yet bubbly demeanor gives way to a seriousness about mentoring in a rough and tumble industry that requires more street smarts and commitment to the art form called jazz. Kris Davis portrays a musician who loves composing, adores learning from the masters, and takes all of that into the studio and on stage to share with her colleagues. She adores jazz, as do many other classically trained pianists. It's the opportunity to improvise, and does she ever. In this episode, we also do a deep dive into Kris Davis's newest album, Run the Gauntlet. It's dedicated to 6 influential women jazz musicians, and dig into her composition process, which I find fascinating. She explains her artistic approach, including her use of nature and some real cool piano sounds she calls found sounds in her highly improvised compositions. Thanks to Kris Davis and Pyroclastic's generosity, you will hear 3 tracks from Run the Gauntlet. The Kris Davis Trio is comprised of 3 highly accomplished, award-winning artists. Kris Davis, of course, on piano, Robert Hurst is on bass, and Jonathan Blake on drums. The 23rd episode opens with Heavy Footed. At about 30 minutes, you will hear Dream State, and it closes with Little Footsteps. Thank you for spending your time listening to this podcast. If you are a subscriber, wonderful. You are part of a fast-growing membership. If not, when you do subscribe, you become one of the first to learn of new episodes when they are published. Thank you for listening. We begin with Heavy Footed from the album Run the Gauntlet by Kris Davis and the Kris Davis Trio, here on Strictly Jazz Sounds. I'm Steve Browngen. Kris Davis, this is Steve Browngan, and you are on Strictly Jazz Sounds. What a delight it is to have you.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
You are a pianist who hails from Vancouver, Canada. You're a band leader and co-leader and enjoy being a side person, I understand. And you are the founder and owner of Pyroclastic Records, an educator and the associate program director of creative development at the Berklee Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice. You are also a Steinway artist, a 2021 Doris Duke artist, alongside Wayne Shorter and Danilo Perez, Pianist of the Year by Downbeat Magazine in 2022 and 2020, and Pianist and Composer of the Year by the Jazz Journalists Association in 2021. And in 2019, your album Diatom Ribbons, I hope I pronounced that right,
Yes.
was named Jazz Album of the Year by both the New York Times and the NPR Music Jazz Critics Poll. And your music can be found on these other labels: ECM, Intact, Clean Feed, and Astral Spirits. Did I capture most of you?
I think so. I would also maybe add that you can find some of my early albums on the Spanish label Fresh Sound Records.
Fresh Sound Records. There you have it. As a matter of fact, I have the album Fresh Sound.
You mean on Fresh Sound Records?
On Fresh Sound Records.
Yeah, there were 3 or 4 of them. Yes.
Let's jump right into your next release. The name of the album is Run the Gauntlet, and it features you, of course, on piano. Robert Hurst is on bass, Jonathan Blake on drums. When is it expected to be released?
On September 27th.
September 27th. And this album is dedicated to 6 trailblazer women jazz pianists. Who are they, and what inspired you to dedicate it to these particular women?
I've been working for the Berklee Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice, as you mentioned. That was founded by Terry Lynn Carrington in 2018. And one of the things we talk about is mentorship, about representation in jazz. And I guess I never really thought about it that much until I joined the Institute. I started to think about some of the pianists that really had an impact on me as a pianist, and also concentrating on a life in the arts as a woman, as a mother, and how that might affect actually having a career as an artist in jazz. And so this album, I thought would be really nice to dedicate it to those 6 pianists that have had a big impact on me in different ways. Should I read the list of the pianists and maybe a little bit about them, or?
Why don't you talk about them?
Okay.
And you can share a little bit about each one. And what was it about that woman, or what is it about that woman that compels you to have them part of your album dedication?
So the 6 pianists are Jerry Allen and Sylvie Courvoisier, Marilyn Crispell, Angelica Sanchez, Renee Rosnes, and Carla Bley. But yeah, each of those pianists has had a different kind of impact on me at different stages of my development. And some of them I never met. Jerry Allen, I only met after a concert once to just share my appreciation for her music. And some are dear friends like Angelica Sanchez and Sylvie Courvoisier. I'll just go through each person and tell you a little bit about them and my relationship with them. I also wanted to feature and dedicate it to these 6 pianists because I also want their names to carry on. I want people to know who they are. I want people to check out their music and be curious. Maybe if they hear my trio album, they might go, oh, I wonder how this person has influenced this music on the album. And so it's really to feature and lift them up as well.
Oh, please share about each of those women. It was my delight to have had some interaction with at least 4 of them.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's always interesting to find out who people know and don't know. I thought there might be a few, but that people might not know, but I'm always surprised to find out that there's always a couple. So Angelica Sanchez, I met at the Banff Center for the Arts in 2000, and she was an instructor there. And that was the first time I learned about improvised music and free music, and her music and the music she'd make with her partner Tony Malaby became very influential for me. And when I moved to New York, they invited me to their home, and I would go and play sessions on the weekends and talk about music and listen to music, and they both became very dear friends. And Angie became a mom, I think in her son's 18 now. 18
Oh,
years
geez.
ago. And I was
Already.
yeah, I know, it flew by. I wanted to be a mother, and seeing someone a little bit older than me continue on with a life in the arts and music was really inspiring after she became a mom. And she's still a dear friend now. We started a summer workshop this past summer called the International Music Creators and Collaborators Workshop. And we had that at Bard College, and it's for emerging artists. And we had Dave Holland come, and Billy Hart, and Taylor Hobynum, and just a lot of really great, wonderful players and musical thinkers. And so
Outstanding.
she's my partner in
Yeah.
crime for this new endeavor.
That's great.
Marilyn Crispell, I heard Marilyn's music in my early 20s, this solo piano record called Selected Works 1983 to 86. When I asked her about this, she's, I don't know what that record is. I think somebody compiled and put this record together, but she's just fierce. The way she plays on that album really made a big impact on me early on. And then I had the pleasure of meeting her 2 or 3 years ago. I just reached out to her through email, and I went to visit her in Woodstock where she lives, and we've become dear friends. And it's really amazing to be close and just share time with someone that you've respected for so long, and learn more about what it's like to be in the arts, in the music as you age, and how that affects things. And just, again, it's like the mentorship experience just continues. And I'm 44 now, and I'm still enjoying that experience of mentorship. So
That's great.
yeah.
That's great. Her music is really amazing.
Yeah. And she came to the workshop we did and sat in with us. There's a picture of Angelica and Marilyn and I all playing 3 pianos together at the concert. It was
Oh,
really
that's
special.
excellent. That's really special. Yeah.
So Rini Rosnes is a pianist from Canada, from BC. And when I was 17 or 18, somebody had said, oh, you should check out Rini Rosnes's music, because I'm also from Canada. I'm also a woman. And so I thought, okay, I guess they want me to check out another woman pianist from Canada. But then, of course,
Of course. Only 2 women in Canada.
I know, that's how it was.
Yeah.
So I checked out a couple of her albums, and she had just put out this record called Ancestors, which is this beautiful album. And she was adopted, and she found her real parents. And anyway, this record is really incredible collection of pieces, and she's just also a fierce player. And when I moved to Toronto to go to school, I met her there, and we became friends. And I would take care of her son when she would come to Canada. And then when I moved to New York, she helped me out a lot. Would go and sit backstage at Carnegie Hall while she played. And so, again, just like really amazing mentorship, opening the door to say, come and see what this is behind the scenes. And I was actually with her on September 11th, her and her partner, Billy Drummond. So we were forever be connected over that day.
Oh, that's excellent.
And then Carla Bley, I never got to meet Carla. I wanted to before she passed, but unfortunately we didn't get a chance to. But I'm just a huge fan of her music. I've recorded a few of her pieces, and her music's had a big influence on my writing, especially. And Jerry Allen, who I mentioned, I never met Jerry really to spend any time with her. But before she passed away, Terry Lynn Carrington, was a very close friend and collaborator of hers,
Yes.
asked me to play. And then Jerry passed away a few months later, and Terry put together these tribute concerts for Jerry. And so I got a chance to play her music, to really spend a lot of time and dive deeply into her compositions, and meet the people that were closest with her, who played with her. Also her brother, Mount Allen, who's a wonderful supporter. So I would say that this new album is mainly influenced by Jerry and her music because I've spent so much time with it in the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, I was really fortunate to have spent over a period of 4 days with Jerry Allen.
Oh, what was that like?
It was phenomenal. It was an experience, and I still think about it, and I still look at the photos, and every time I hear her recordings, I think about her. She was a singular, special person, and her music was beyond. It really captured so much. I was really moved by Jerry. And out of all of the musicians I have interviewed, and that's a lot, and a lot of musicians I spent time with, Jerry still stands out as that special person.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. I wish I would have met her. It's such a strange thing to feel like you're connected to this person's music and legacy somehow, but to have never actually interacted is a very weird experience.
Yeah, I bet it is. You've remarked, I saw it someplace else, but that Jerry Allen's recording, The Printmakers,
Yes.
inspired you to return to chordal structures on the piano following a hiatus of 17 years from playing chords. Could you please explain to the listeners what you mean by that, returning to the chords? What is your writing structure now? What was your writing structure before? If you could explain that.
Yeah. When I got into jazz, I was really into Herbie Hancock and Keith Jarrett. And you could,
Hmm.
like anyone who listens to people that play their instrument, how you get inspired and you want to do that thing that you hear, you want to emulate how someone else plays.
Yeah.
And so that language was like really embedded in the way that I was playing in terms of Herbie and Keith and just that kind of jazz piano lineage. And so when I moved to New York, I thought I need to like get away from this these influences in a way because I have to figure out who I am and what I'm drawn to because there's a lot of other music that I love, but I hadn't really thought about like how I might use that as a way to develop my own sound on the piano. So for 3 or 4 years after moving to New York, I stopped going to hear other piano players. I would go to hear groups with no piano.
Oh,
Um,
that's interesting.
yeah, just try to see what if I try to think more from another perspective of like a horn player or just playing with my right hand or creating lines between my two hands that aren't necessarily like chordally based on a set group of harmonic structures, much more
Yeah.
linear.
How was that? What did you discover when you were listening to these groups with no piano?
I was going to listen to a lot of groups that had no piano and were also exploring free improvisation. And what I learned from listening to groups like that and also playing groups was that the role of the piano in jazz didn't actually serve what I wanted to do in the music as an improviser. So like as a pianist, your role is to comp or to lay out the harmonic structure for the soloist. And when I would try to do that in a free improvised setting, that kind of locked everybody into what I decided the harmony was instead of having it more conversational or more as if all of us are composers, we all have a say in how the harmony is developed or expressed. And so this led me on a journey of using more contemporary classical influences to find ways to be more conversational in terms of how we were developing the harmony in a free improvised setting.
Returning to the question of chordal structures versus non-chordal structures, meaning what?
Not no longer playing chord symbols, no longer thinking about harmony from the bass up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I stopped writing chord symbols. When you see chord symbols, there's a lot of go, oh, this is what I do over D flat major 7 sharp 11. This is the
Yeah.
shape. Whereas if I wrote the voicings out, if I wrote the harmony out, if I thought more linear instead of more horizontal instead of vertical, that might lead to some interesting things. So I guess I don't know if that's answering your question.
I think so. And Sonny Rollins, as a tenor saxophonist, discovered back in the mid 50s that he preferred to play without a piano and without that type of chordal structure so that it freed him up Did you discover that? Those bands with those instruments, with those musicians who played pianoless?
I would say so. It freed me up as a soloist as well, but I would say that I made me think of it as a step farther in terms of, like, when Sonny was playing in a trio and the drums and the bass are still providing that functional role and he's still playing as a soloist or playing the melody, those are traditional roles of those instruments, and in free improvisation, suddenly you remove strip back all those roles so that the drums can now be the pianist, or the pianist can be a flute section, whatever the saxophonist can be, like a choir of birds. So these things start to open up in terms of how we relate to the music. And that's what I found fascinating, and it just kept pulling me in.
Well, that's a good way to put it because, believe it or not, that leads me to my next question. You did so well. I understand that you like to incorporate sounds from nature. Yeah, it's similar to what Eric Dolphy did, or Nat Coleman, and Sonny Rollins. Explain how you accomplished that, or did you, in Run the Gauntlet, your latest album?
I'm not sure I did that in this particular for this particular project. I think I tried to bring in more nature influences in the last project, Diatom Ribbons.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, and that comes from really my interest in Olivier Messiaen's music, who wrote these beautiful bird call pieces, and he tried to bird calls have, like, microtonal quality to them,
Oh, yes.
and of course, on the piano, you can't do that, so how could you try to emulate that kind of a sound with the 12 pitches that we have? So he creates these 2 notes playing 2 notes at the same time that are sometimes major sevenths or minor ninths, or, like, where it's very close to playing octaves, but it's just skewed on either side, and it gives the feeling of that microtonal bird call thing, and I just found that so inspiring and interesting to try to take something from nature and recreate it on your instrument or in the orchestra or in the band that you're playing with.
Diatom Ribbons does, that's for sure. I really enjoyed that quite a bit. I also noticed throughout your recordings your use of space and diverse sound mechanisms to create these other sounds. What are you incorporating into the piece Softly as You Wake to acquire the sounds made in that compositions?
On that piece, I'm using some prepared piano, which is when you take little different kinds of material and put them in the back of the strings of the piano. So I'm using some magnets and some wooden clothespins and some erasers. And it makes it like another piano is a percussion instrument, but it takes it to the next step of even more percussive, and you get these incredible gong like sounds. And so I use them as found sounds where I put them in the piano, but I don't know what they're going to sound like or even where I've placed them. And then I just play and I start to find things and I create something with what I find.
What's the term that you use for that?
I'm calling it found sounds.
Yeah, that's I like that. Okay. Now
That's our job as improvisers, is to, like,
it
make
is,
something out of what we find. Um,
and you did, and it sounds great.
Thank you.
The that the first piece, the title track, Run the Gauntlet, sounds like you're doing just that. The way it goes.
I wrote that for Jonathan Blake. I heard Jonathan like 20 years ago, and I just loved his playing so much. And I thought, oh gosh, I would love to play with him. I don't know if he'd ever play with me, but I really would like to play with him at some point. And one of the things I love about Jonathan is the way that he plays over vamps, because he has a way of framing them and flipping them around and just doing all these things around them that make them feel differently. It's very exciting. And so this piece was written for him where there's a series of vamps and he has to navigate all these different vamps and challenges, and that's why it's called Run the Gauntlet.
Oh, I
Is that a term that's used in the States? I asked someone about that and they were like, "What does that mean?" And we say that in Canada often.
oh yeah,
That's right.
I I still use the term.
Okay.
I'm going to guess it still is. I see it in literature.
Okay.
I think of the Gauntlet as something with castles.
Right.
And I don't know. Now the three compositions, when you have first steps, little footsteps, and heavy footed. Did you compose those sequentially, or did you compose those and then threw the titles in?
I wrote the piece Little Footsteps for Dave Holland's quartet. We went on the road last summer and we're going to record that piece in September as well. And usually I title things after I write them, which was the case. And I was thinking about this piano part in the section of Little Footsteps where it's kind of these clustery sounds. My house where I live now, the floors are very creaky, and so my son, when he's little, you don't really hear the footsteps or these little pitter patter things, but now he's 11 and he's a giant boy, and we know where he is at all times in the house because of those creaky boards. So that's where the title comes from, the Little Footsteps, and then Heavy Footed, which is the case now.
Oh, that's great. And kids don't walk anyway.
They lead with their heels.
They do. They sure do. Now, the track 6, Beauty Beneath the Rubble, that was written by Jonathan Blake, right?
Yes.
So the next one, Beauty Beneath the Rubble, Meditation or Mediation?
Meditation.
Meditation. I have a typo. Beautiful in how you and Robert Hurst have this staccato thing going. It's creating a meditative undertone. Meanwhile, Jonathan is tapping the cymbal. Such a great piece, a wonderful piece. Is that what you were intending for that?
That was an improvised piece, so
It was totally improvised.
Yeah, it was whatever it was going to be. But I'm glad you reacted and responded to it positively. I like that track too.
Great track. I do that pizzicato thing that you and Robert did out of that.
Cool, thank you.
That was great. Knotweed, Knotweed for listeners. Knotweed. What sort of feeling is a knot in your stomach? I think you prepare for us that when you open up the composition, you set it up, and then about 2 or so minutes into the track, all of you start to really swing, and that knot just goes away.
Yeah, the melody was inspired by a Julius Hemphill composition. I'm a big fan of his music. But at Knotweed, or I'm sure people know out in Columbus, maybe you don't have knotweed, but it's this invasive weed that takes over. We have it in our yard. And we found out in the UK, you can't even get a mortgage on your house if you have knotweed because it's really hard to get rid of.
No kidding. Really?
Yeah. So this weed is taking over, and my husband is like declared war on the weed. And so it looks like he's winning, but I'm not sure. Just what the piece is like too.
I know of another weed that's like that, Creeping Charlie.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I went after that with a vengeance.
Did you win?
I lost. No.
Okay.
I lost. I'll tell your husband,
Okay.
give it up. And Coda Queen. What are you referring to in this track, and what are you bringing to a finish?
I don't know. I seem to write these tunes, and then I write like a coda to the tune, this thing I want to get to eventually. And I'm often much happier with how the coda sounds than the actual tune. So
Is that right?
Yeah, I have a few songs like that. I'm like, oh, that coda
That's great.
is pretty cool. So I'm deeming myself the coda queen.
In the dream state, you lay this one low and slow. It's dreamy.
Yes. That's kind
That
of
was
a
the intent.
through composed piece.
Got it. subtones. Once again, you and Robert Hurst get into your thing with the piano strings and the bass. You are creating your own subtones, and Jonathan is doing his thing quietly behind you, adding to the rhythm. It's not until you're about halfway through the track when the subtones get bolder and bolder.
Another improvised piece. So.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Then I'm attracted to the improvised pieces. Oh, man. So when you sit down to compose, what's the process that you use? Or maybe I should be more specific. What was the process that you used for Run the Gauntlet?
I'll answer the first way you asked the question, which is
Sure.
usually it's some kind of like, I think about it like a macro and a micro experience. So there's like the macro experience of what do I want to, what kind of tune do I want to write? What's inspiring me? And it might be something that I've heard in music or something in nature, whatever it is. And it usually comes to me when I'm out walking around. So I walk every day. And that's when I get my thinking done. And then these ideas come. And then when I go back to the piano, then I have to work out the notes and rhythms and figure out the micro part of it. So there's always this balance between the big picture and detail work of what the piece actually is. And then as you're writing it, sometimes the micro part of it, as it starts to develop, it takes on a life of its own. And suddenly you have to change the big idea or maybe sometimes let go of it for the thing that's emerging. So it's really just like a ways of getting started. But that's usually how it is for me.
You have quite a process. And what I really enjoy is your discussion of etudes and how you try to figure things out using, you create your own etudes.
Yeah, exactly. I think that improvisation and composition, they go hand in hand, or they can. And composition was a great way for me to work out certain ideas that I wanted to get into my improvising. For example, let's say I really wanted to be able to play a line, like a singular line, very fast and split it between two hands. So I would write out, it could be, sometimes it's just a bunch of random notes, like a tone row. And then I might displace some of the notes and then try to play it between two hands and see how it fits and figure out what is it that I like about this, what don't I like about it, and start to make changes. And suddenly, this whole other language emerges and it addresses this thing of wanting to play a line between the two hands to be able to play something really fast. So I've done that throughout my life as a composer and improviser, and they always, like you said, they go hand in hand. And so in a tune like Run the Gauntlet, that was really an etude for Jonathan in that he was going to have to navigate all these different vamps and we
So
were
you
going to
set
hold
him
it
up.
down. Yes,
So this album is released on your record label, Pyroclastic.
correct.
You've had this label since 2016.
Yes.
What compelled you to start this label?
I was working with a lot of smaller labels in Europe, and I got a few grants to make my own projects, and I didn't really need the support of these smaller labels since I owned the project outright. And it just made sense to create a label where I could release my own music and start to build a library and, a library of my own work. And then the idea was to expand it to other artists, and we did that in 2019. And now we have almost, 36 releases this year.
It sounds like John and Rabagon. what he did with his, but you created a nonprofit.
Yes.
And this nonprofit is to support the work of the label, right?
Exactly. It's to support the work of the artists and the dissemination of their work through the label.
The artists who want to be part of your label, what do they have to do to get your label for them?
First and foremost, we're interested in supporting artists that are adventurous artists, that are non-commercial artists. It's not popular music that we're putting out. It's people that are composing music, that are exploring ideas and also trying to help them build their careers. So there's various artists that have a couple of albums on the label.
Yeah, I don't think Adele is going to make your catalog.
Then we wouldn't need the not for profit. So it's how it works.
That's exactly right. You also sell scores.
Yes, we do.
Wow. How is that doing for you?
We don't collect any money for that. That goes directly to the artist. And
That's great.
it's something that it just makes sense to do because besides all the things that I'm doing, I do a lot of teaching and I work with a lot of student groups, and people are always asking me for my scores. And this is just another way to generate a little bit more revenue and have them organized in one place. So it's been very helpful to me. I think the other artists feel the same, but it's totally optional if they want to sell the scores on the label website or not.
There's been a change in how the labels are used. First of all, are you finding other artists doing the same thing, creating their own labels as a way of assuring that what they find interesting and their friends and colleagues find interesting, that they are able to record them instead of being cast out and have to face the mean reality of a few labels that are owned by just a few people?
I wish people would do it more. There are definitely a lot of artists doing it, but I try to encourage the younger generation of musicians to get organized and start a label because it's a way of there's like a sea, as you said, of artists releasing albums, and it's very hard to when you're getting started, especially how to find the people that you might be drawn to. So creating a label where there's a like-minded idea around the music and around creativity can give your audience a place to go to. So for me, that's what the labels are doing now. That's how they're functioning. The way that I'm doing it with the not for profit is a little more connected to it that John Zorn does his label Sodic, which also has a not for profit. And it's really that it's not meant to make a profit. It doesn't matter if it receives a profit or not. It's just to really help the artist get the work out there. So I try to encourage young people to again create those opportunities and those spaces so that people can find them, and you don't need a lot of money to do that. All you need is a name. That's how Pyroclastic started out. It was just a name and like a web page or a link on Bandcamp, and it snowballs from there.
And Bandcamp is just a great spot for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it has done a lot for so many other artists who otherwise would not have a place to sell their stuff.
That's true. Yep. No, it's an incredible resource. And the problem with Bandcamp, again, is that if you release a single album, it's just very hard to find it. So these labels can provide that umbrella and a place for audiences who are interested in following your work and others similar to what you're doing.
Another thing that I saw on the albums that really attracted my attention was the artwork. Are you creating a catalog of album covers to be collected? These are gorgeous pieces.
They're very beautiful. Someone that we work closely with, David Breskin, who's a producer on some of the albums, he does the visual art for a lot of the releases, not all of them, but many of them, and he's really interested in the visual art world. So he calls in his connections and has had some luck getting artists just sharing their art with us and using it for the cover. So we're very fortunate to have his interest and eye for the label.
Boy, there's so much I could talk to you about. I wish this could have been a 2-hour conversation, which it almost turned into one with John and Robin.
Oh, wow.
But anyway.
I used to play with John.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he had a set called the Rid Quartet. It was all improvised.
That was part of the conversation I wanted to have with you too. Okay. I wanted to talk about John and Russ Johnson.
Yep.
Who was a friend of mine back in
Oh,
Wisconsin.
wow. Okay. That's for 25 years. He produced it and he's on my first album.
Yeah, that's a big reason why I have it. And so you guys have done a whole lot of stuff together, and you had a musical journey that started with Lifespan, and it was quite an album. It is quite an album. That's the thing that you all had in common, was you pushed the boundaries of jazz music, or should I say, just music. Really, you really had something going. And what John told me was what he really enjoyed doing was going over to your place, hanging out and jamming and just working through things.
Yeah, that's right. We worked a lot on things, and we were listening to a lot of artists like Tim Byrne and Tom Rainey. And when you'd ask them about improvised music, they would say, "Oh, we don't practice that. We don't talk about it. We just do it." And with John, it was so great because he would come over to the house with Ruben Radding and Jeff Davis, and we would like actually talk about improvised music and play, or we'd play and record it and then listen back and talk about what we were hearing. And it just helped to provide like understanding and context. That was a really special group.
Yeah, both of them speak fondly of you. Anyway, they have great memories. I'm going to switch real quick, see if I can spend just a little time with this, because I can't avoid this. You're at Berklee College of Music, and most importantly, beyond that, the Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice. And your position is Associate Program Director of Creative Development. What does that mean?
Isn't that a great title?
I love it. I Terry Lynn had to have been the one to come up with that.
I think so. I think she was. It means a lot of things. Partly that when I started the Institute, I'd only been there for a year, 6 months. So we were trying to really figure out like, what are we doing and where are we going and who's doing what. And so there's this whole kind of storming around that, like, how do we achieve all of these huge goals that we have for the Institute? With that in mind, what can I tell you? There's so much. I run an outreach program with the Boston Arts Academy where our students mentor their students, and I help oversee that program. We released the new standards book, and it's something that we're promoting in education and in performance that Terry won the Grammy for, that we all won the Grammy for.
Outstanding. It's absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, she's a force. She's so amazing. There's all sorts of projects going on, all sorts of like performance opportunities for the students. Right now we're recording some of those new standards for the saxophone department so that they can use them so that the students, because right now they're just using the real book and it's all by male composers. And so now they're working towards gender equity and trying to balance the repertoire and, shift the canon. So and our students are recording those backing tracks for the students. So there's all sorts of things going on, but I have this cool title where, I can do and create opportunities, and it's very special and free. Part of that summer workshop I was mentioning, this International Music Creator and Collaborators Workshop, is also a partnership between Berklee, JGJ, and Bard College and Pyroclastic Arts. So just creating opportunities and partnerships like that. I have a lot of freedom in the role.
And JGJ is?
Jazz and Gender Justice. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to spell that out. And the real book used to be called The Fake Book.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who haven't been keeping up with that term over the years, I knew it as The Fake Book.
Yeah, The Fake Book those pieces were transcribed by Berklee students in the 70s, and there were all sorts of errors in them, and then they fixed the books and fixed the errors and released the real book and got the rights from each of the composers to really put it in a book. But there were no women composers other than Anne Ronell for Willow Weep for Me in those books. The Institute put out the new jazz standards book a couple of years ago now of compositions by 101 women composers. And it's incredible and full circle that Berklee releases this book that they created in the 70s that was like so important for learning jazz. I'm from Calgary, Canada, a very small scene, and I was in the basement with my friends learning what the jazz repertoire was from these books.
Yeah,
they really were important for learning the canon of the music.
I have my fake book, and I'm not even too sure what I did with it. When I stopped playing, I it sat for a long time. But what I do have the new book sitting on the piano right now, waiting for somebody to open it up. I'm just putting that out there. That's all.
You mean the new book, like the new standards book, or? Oh,
Yes,
okay,
the new standards book. I had the new standards book sitting right there.
okay.
I think your name is on
All
it.
right. I'm looking forward to seeing your piano. What kind of piano do you have?
Oh, we have with a Baldwin or something like that,
Oh,
some basic piano, but it works.
it
It,
can't, yeah, that's gonna be fun.
yeah, we got it from my father-in-law, who was an Episcopal priest, and he wrote hymns, but he also just loved playing classical music.
Oh, wow.
Mentoring, the issue of mentoring, if there is one word that I could draw a string through pretty much of the conversation, is mentoring. And this connecting that we're doing right now, this is what is needed in order to help these younger musicians or those who have not gotten their foot into the business quite yet.
Yep.
And it's how folks like Emmanuel Wilkins, even Julieta Eugenio.
Mm.
Have you listened to her work yet?
I've seen her name, but I haven't heard her music.
Saxophonist. Folks like Miki Yamanaka, who has spent a tremendous amount of time at Smalls and has now really gotten her foot in. But she had some mentoring done, and now she's mentoring. That is the word, and that I keep hearing that people are now doing. It's such a different industry right now. At least I'm finding that. Am I seeing what's going on?
What do you mean by, like, different in what way?
Different in and maybe I missed this, but over the years, I didn't see what seems to be more intentional mentoring going on. Instead of folks, mostly guys, just hanging out with other guys, there's now more structured mentoring going on.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And
Yeah. There's
yeah,
I think the key word you're saying is structured mentoring. Structured. The key word.
that's really what I'm talking
Yeah,
about. Yeah.
yeah. And part of that is, you said, like, when you would get the opportunity to be a side person in somebody's band, that was the mentorship was there. You had a chance to work with the leader who had that experience, and you got to see that and be part of that, and then carry on with your own groups later on. That's how so many people had that opportunity. Um, but one of the things we talk about in the Institute is that a lot of women didn't get that experience of being mentored in those kinds of groups. They just weren't considered for those roles and those positions. So it's really cool to see these opportunities for young people, especially young women, being mentored in these more structured things, like the Next Jazz Legacy, which is another program that Terry Lynn started with New Music USA to support women and non-binary musicians to be mentored by, in this exact experience of playing in the person's band, and then also having mentorship, actual lessons with people. So there's a lot of this structured mentoring right now, which is great. The one thing that I missed, that the few times that I got a chance to work with someone like Tony Malaby, where I would just go to his house and we would hang out all day and play and eat food. And there's something about, like, getting invited to do that, just of somebody's own gesture and free will, or like good gesture, good nature, to want to bring you in. Now everything is all about structure and money, and I totally get why, but I miss those days of just being invited just because.
seeing any reason why that needed to stop.
I don't think it needed to stop. It's just that now everybody's just trying to make enough money to survive, and everybody's got to,
Oh, I
like,
see.
and so now there's more funds going into, if you're going to spend your time doing this, you want to be, like, compensated for it. So
Yeah.
it's just a different model, different structure.
Yeah, I can understand that. Just a few more things here. Now, you were asked, choose whom to have dinner with from the other side, and you said, I hope I pronounced this right, Jorge Leggetti.
Yes.
and you said you would love to pick his brain about his composition. I got such a charge out of listening to you talk about the technical aspects of composing and playing and studying. What was it about him that, by the way, did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, I think you did pretty well. I'm not sure I could do much better. I think it's Georgi Ligeti, but
Georgi
some
Ligeti.
people say Ligeti.
And what was it about him that wanted you to spend dinner with him if he was around?
It goes back to what you asked about etudes. Ligeti is, for me, his piano etudes are really an important part of my development and spoke to me. And there's something about his etudes. First, I should mention he had these pieces called Musica Ricercata that he wrote in the 50s. And each piece has a limited amount of pitches. So the first piece is based on one pitch, the second piece is based on two pitches, and so on and so forth. And each piece just has this own little world. He can take these limitations in the music and create these incredible compositions using the other elements of music in terms of dynamics and range and development. And you've heard some of these pieces. You probably heard the second piece of this collection in a movie called Eyes Wide Shut, where Tom Cruise is like walking through the streets and you hear this da, 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 da.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that's the second piece from that collection.
Oh, it's a great piece.
Yeah, and I just love the idea of limitations. Monk is like also classic composer who like uses limitations to improvise and to compose, and Sonny Rollins as well. That idea of using something very small to develop an idea um, really inspires me. And Ligeti does this in different ways. So these piano etudes, there's a whole two books of these pieces, and you can always hear, just like in the first 5 or 10 seconds of the piece, what the limitation is. Like on this piece, Fanfares, there's this running scale, and then there's a melody, and then it flips. The right hand takes over the running scale, and the left hand plays the melody. And through this piece, it keeps doing this. Left hand, right hand playing the line, and the other hand plays a melody, and it just becomes more and more complicated and like spiraling this huge. It's so beautiful, to the point where like I get to the end of these pieces and I just can't play them anymore. They're so hard. It happens every time. I make it about 2/3 of the way through and then I just fold. Um, but I love those pieces and I love the way his mind worked. I think he was very influenced by jazz as well. And you've heard, I'm sure you've heard many of his other pieces like Atmospheres, orchestral piece, or his string quartets. You might not even know
That's
you
very
made.
likely.
Yeah.
That's right. That's very likely. I have one more question.
Okay.
I've got a whole list of questions. What am I saying? There's one more question I will ask
Okay.
because we're at the top of our hour. In your Audi's interview, you were asked for your opinion regarding your favorite recording. You said at the time it was Diatom Ribbons, which was recently released at that time. Today, what is your opinion? What would you say?
Wait, it said my favorite recording was my own album? That can't be right.
Yes, I read it right from the site.
Maybe it said what was your favorite album that you made?
It asked for your opinion regarding your favorite recording.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go back and look at that. I don't think I would. I don't think I would say my own recording a question like that. But okay.
I don't know. Maybe it was your own favorite recording, a favorite recording of yours.
Okay. I love that recording for a number of reasons. One is that at the time I was working in these two separate communities of connecting with Terry Lynn and Esperanza Spalding and Val Genti. And then I was also playing in this improvised world with Tony Malaby and Chess Smith and Trevor Dunn. And I just thought, wow, these musicians, they don't know each other, but I think they would love each other.
Just bring them
If we
together.
brought them together. So I wrote these
Yeah.
pieces to create that meeting of these two worlds. And I was just really happy how it turned out. And I was happy that these people came together and made music and found it. And Ron St. Germain, who's an incredible engineer, recorded it and mixed and mastered it. I'm sorry, mixed it, not mastered it. And he worked with everybody. He worked with Mariah Carey, Ornette Coleman, Whitney Houston. Go down the list. Stevie Wonder. He's in his late 70s now, and he's just has incredible ears, and it was such a treat to see him organize sounds. And there's one point where Nels Cline is playing, and he's like flying Nels Cline around, like panning him left and right based on what he's doing, and it just creates this whole spatial thing that I didn't even know was possible.
What do you say? Kris Davis, what a conversation. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to leave it here for now.
Okay, awesome.
Pick it up again, perhaps when you come to Columbus.
That sounds good. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me. This has been really fun.
Kris Davis's new recording, Run the Gauntlet, just dropped today. The Kris Davis Trio will go on tour to bring you music from this fantastic album. Go to her website to learn if she's performing someplace near you. Her website is krisdavis.net. Thanks to Kris and Pyroclastic Records for the 3 tracks used in this episode. The theme music is by Johannes Wallman from his composition McCoy, which can be found on his record Precarious Towers. Support live jazz wherever you are. If you are so inclined, provide some remarks about this episode. I do learn from listeners' comments. You can email me by going to strictlyjazzsounds@gmail.com. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. You'll be one of the first to receive new episodes. Talk about new episodes. Upcoming episodes include Downbeat Magazine rising star, vibraphonist Chin Chin Liu, and Blue Note recording artist, saxophonist Walter Smith III. Thanks so much for listening to Strictly Jazz Sounds. I'm Steve Browngen.